Baseball has had its share of characters, very weird characters. Rube Waddle was one of the most dominant pitchers in the history of the game, but often would go missing for days at a time to fish, wrestle alligators, or lead parades. He even disappeared during the 1905 World Series, and to this day, no one knows what really happened when he left. Wade Boggs ate chicken before every single game. Mark the Bird Fidrich would talk to the baseball while on the mound. Bill Spaceman Lee ran for president in 1988 as a member of the Rhinoceros Party. Mo Berg was a good glove no-hit catcher who was also a legit spy. Manny Ramirez would leave 5-digit paychecks in the glove compartment of his car for weeks at a time. But when it comes to the weirdest in all of baseball history, one name really sticks out: pitcher Zack Greinke, whose oddities have become the stuff of legend the league over. Greinke possesses cognitive abilities and quirks that you just don't see on a big league ball field. As Yogi Berra said, baseball is 90% mental, the other half is physical. To someone like Zack, that quote would probably make perfect sense. Very few players have possessed either Greinke's sky-high baseball IQ or his break-the-mold physical talents. At the same time, few elite players have suffered through bouts of mental disturbance akin to what Greinke experienced early in his career. Often, in his situation, it must have seemed like baseball was 100% mental, and the physical was just an excuse to toy around with the gifts he was blessed with. His career numbers speak volumes to his productivity: over 220 wins, an excellent ERA of 3.49, a 1.20 ERA plus, nearly 3,000 Ks, but even these numbers don't truly capture the totality of Greinke's greatness. For 15 straight seasons between 2007 and 2022, Greinke's ERA plus stayed above 100, and twice it rose above 200. During that span, he averaged 30.5 starts per season, in an age where hard throwers tear UCLs with frightening regularity. That's how he became one of only 5 pitchers in MLB history to strike out 1,000 different batters, joining the elite company of Greg Maddux, Randy Johnson, Roger Clemens, and Nolan Ryan. And he did it his way. Greinke truly does march to the tune of his own drummer. The truth is, when someone likes mowing lawns for a living as much as pitching in the majors, you're never sure how to interpret the Greinke legends that still live on in clubhouses all over the league. But we're going to do our best today to capture the enigma of Zack, as we attempt to document the weirdest player in baseball history. But before we get more into that, I want to tell you a little bit about today's sponsor, Henson Shaving, and their extremely high quality AL13 razor. Now, I've been using the AL13 for a couple weeks now, and the number one thing that I like about it is how close of a shave it gets, probably because it was literally made to aerospace standards, as they've made parts in the past for both the ISS space station and the Mars rover. On top of that, it just feels like such a higher quality razor than the ones that you're typically used to, right? Those kind of dingy plastic ones. This one's solid, and you know it's built to last. I also love I don't have to keep spending money on all these razor blades. Personally, I probably go through at least 2 or 3 a month because I shave every day. So knowing that I'm saving a bunch in just razor refills is awesome, considering theirs cost just 10 cents a piece in comparison to like the $5 for 3 that I normally pay. That's why I know the AL13 may seem a little bit pricey at $69.99, but it more than makes up for it within just 2 years of use. They also have a ton of cool colors as well, so you can customize it to your personal standards. So yeah, check out the AL13 today at hensonshaving.com or at the link in my pinned comment or description. And now, if you use code MTC at checkout, you'll get 100 free blades as well. That's about 3 to 4 years worth. Now, back to our video. It's possible that the key to understanding Zack Greinke comes from a phrase awash in global popularity: Florida Man. Florida Man is a trope that speaks to the onslaught of crazy that seems to inhabit the souls of men born and raised in the Sunshine State. They do things that normal people just don't. Zack Greinke is a total Florida man. He was born and raised in Apopka, Florida, a city of 55,000 located 20 miles north of Orlando. It's mostly a football town, having produced over a dozen NFL players. But Greinke didn't join the other boys in the ultra-competitive youth football leagues that dominate entire communities in Florida. Not because the young Zack wasn't competitive. He was, very much so, but his sport was tennis, not football, and by the time Greinke was 8, he was one of the best players his age in the country. Before matches, he would cry because he was afraid to lose. Over time, the other players started getting better as well, only fueling Greinke's anxiety, an emotional pit he'd sink into throughout his early life. He started to hate tennis so much that he walked away completely, quitting the sport to focus on golf, basketball, and baseball. It's important to understand that both of Greinke's parents were teachers, and they allowed Zack to pick the sports he'd play or wouldn't play without much of a stake in it. He felt as though he had the power to make his own choices, which would become one of the great sources of strength in his life. In 1999, Greinke led his team to the Senior League World Series title, where he played shortstop and hit around 700 for the tournament. When he entered Apopka High School, shortstop was his primary position, and during his high school career, he slugged 31 home runs. Until he was a senior, he'd only pitched in relief. But in that final season, he started and went 9-2, showcasing a fastball that touched the mid-90s. Scouts already rated him highly up the middle, but as his perfect game scouting report said, he has one of the best arms in the country, and it seemed to be a shame to waste that in the infield. The Royals nabbed him with the 6th overall pick of the 2002 draft, signing him for $2.5 million. He got sent to rookie ball, but ended up pitching at High A Wilmington in that first year, which is unheard of these days for an 18-year-old. The next season, he went 15-4 between High A and Double A, and in 2004, after 6 AAA starts, Greinke was promoted to Kansas City. But before he departed the minor leagues, he picked up something that would become a huge part of the Greinke legend, an eephus pitch, thrown around 50 to 65 miles per hour. How he learned the pitch reveals much about Greinke's weirdness. In 2004, right before getting called up, he told his AAA pitching coach Dave LaRoche that he didn't need to do any bullpen sessions. He preferred fielding grounders at short. LaRoche made him a deal. If Greinke would throw some fastballs, then LaRoche would teach him how to throw the lob, a very slow eephus curve that Dave used with the Yankees back in the 1980s. This came with one request, that Greinke would never throw it in a game. Deal. Well, kind of. Greinke was transfixed by the pitch, and over the years he's employed it in all kinds of different ways. Once he threw it 12 times in one game against the Pirates. And in his rookie year, fresh from promising LaRoche he wouldn't use it in a game, Greinke threw it to infielder Omar Infante, and got a called strike in the process. But even with his literal call-up comes one of those Zack Greinke moments that show why he is the weirdest player in baseball history. Getting that first promotion to the show is something that can move a lot of grown men to tears. It's the culmination of years of struggle, of doubt, of cutthroat competition. It also involves a hefty, life-changing pay raise. It's usually a momentous event. The manager of Kansas City's AAA affiliate in Omaha was Mike Jerschele, who had the very pleasant task of telling the 20-year-old Greinke that he was going to the majors. But Zack didn't take the news like almost every other player in the history of the game would. There were no tears of joy. Instead, there was a long pause. Then Greinke proceeded to wonder out loud if instead of bringing him up as a pitcher, the Royals would consider sending him back down to Low A so he could become a shortstop. "I really do think I could become a pretty good shortstop," said Greinke. Jerschele found himself reiterating what a huge honor it was to be summoned to the majors, that it was supposed to be a dream come true. Greinke responded with, "Oh, okay." Then he walked out. Jerschele didn't know if Greinke was being serious or not, but considering what happened in the next few years, the smart money would bet that Greinke was probably being as honest as you can be. He actually wanted to be sent down, not up. Greinke went 8-11 for the Royals and finished 4th in AL Rookie of the Year voting. His ERA plus was 120 as he logged 145 innings for a bad Royals team. But he was just 2 years out of high school, not that far removed from being the shortstop that had clubbed 31 dingers. He still missed it. In his opinion, hitting just wasn't very hard. He told his manager Buddy Bell that very thing, while offering a detailed explanation of why the hardest thing to do in sports wasn't really hard at all. But as an AL pitcher, he'd have limited chances to prove himself. It wasn't until August in Arizona that Greinke got his first big league at-bat. Then he hit a home run. A few years later, when teammate Alex Gordon was struggling, Greinke approached him and asked him to come down and watch some film. Gordon was excited, thinking this very intelligent and insightful baseball guru was going to break down his swing from a pitcher's perspective. Instead, Greinke showed Gordon a clip of that homer he'd hit against the D-backs. He showed it a few times and then said, "Do more of that." The meeting ended. The hitting lesson was over. That homer, though, was perhaps the highlight of Greinke's early career with the Royals. After his rookie season, disaster struck in 2005. Greinke suffered through a horrendous 5-17 campaign, with a .580 ERA while giving up 11.5 hits per 9 innings. In all fairness, his FIP was .449, and the Royals lost 106 games. He was still one of the youngest players in the big leagues. The Royals had set him up to live in the spare bedroom of former star George Brett's house, but he was far removed from the lives of most of his teammates, who oftentimes were older and married. One example of how Greinke interacted with his team came in 2005, when pitcher Jeremy Affeldt came fuming into the dugout after surrendering a homer. That was a pretty good pitch, he claimed, but Greinke had another opinion. It was a terrible pitch, he told Affeldt right to his face. There was more. As evidence, Greinke said he'd gone down to the video room to see the replay, and concluded that the pitch was letter high and right down the middle. A terrible offering, even one Greinke claimed that he could have hit out. Ouch. No wonder Greinke mostly played video games with Brett's children and went fishing alone. He'd call his parents and wonder if he shouldn't go to college and start over. He missed his high school sweetheart. He missed surfing. He hated talking to strangers. He threw himself into intense workouts, but the anger and anxiety remained. Basically, it seemed as if his tennis career was repeating itself, the sport he had dominated and then walked away from. Now, he was getting paid millions, and he thought he'd be happier mowing lawns making $30K a year. He wouldn't consider quitting, would he? All it took was one bullpen session in spring training in 2006. New pitching coach Bob McClure was blunt. When Greinke said he wouldn't consider throwing a two-seamer or changeup, McClure countered with, "You better change your ways unless you want to keep on sucking." McClure didn't know what was swirling inside Greinke. He wasn't going to change anything just to play baseball. He walked away, and at the time, he thought it was for good. This wasn't a hiatus. He was quitting. He had no plans of coming back. But, as fate would have it, he started seeing a psychologist back in Florida, who officially diagnosed him with social anxiety and depression, and, as a treatment, suggested Greinke start taking Zoloft. It yielded benefits after a few weeks, when Greinke told the Royals he wanted to come back, to the minors. They sent him down to Double-A, where Greinke was around players his own age. He was having fun again, but still returned to pitch out of the pen for 3 games with the Royals later that year. A very consequential 3 games it would turn out. It was during that short stint in 2006 that Greinke learned something very important. He needed to throw harder. By the 3rd game, he was hitting 100 miles per hour in his fastball. He even promised to ditch the eephus for the time being. He truly was a changed pitcher. By 2008, he was back in the Royals rotation and even posting a winning record of 13-10 with an ERA of 3.47. Given his battle with mental health, Greinke's return was a huge success. Then came 2009, when Greinke established himself as a truly dominant starter, showcasing his first flashes of Hall of Fame talent on an MLB field. He won the AL Cy Young, posting a record of 16-8 with an ERA of 2.16 with 3 shutouts and a home run rate of just 0.4, meaning that every 18 innings he pitched, he gave up less than 1 homer. His ERA plus that year, over doubly as good as an average pitcher, at a league-leading 205. Nevertheless, the weirdness remained. At his first All-Star game in Chicago, he got to meet President Obama, who was a huge White Sox fan. Greinke, however, wasn't all too pleased with their interaction. Apparently, he was disappointed that Obama didn't call him out because, quote, none of the White Sox liked him. In fact, he wanted Obama to call him a punk. 2009 was also big for Greinke because he married his high school sweetheart, Emily Kuchar, who was a Dallas Cowboys cheerleader. In his next year with the Royals, Greinke's numbers sank a bit to 10-14 with an ERA of 4.17, though with a FIP of 3.34. In the following offseason, KC decided to part ways with their ace, and in return got back 4 solid major leaguers in Alcides Escobar, Lorenzo Cain, Jeremy Jeffress, and Jake Odorizzi, some of who they eventually flipped for James Shields and Wade Davis, and in the process won a World Series ring in 2015. Milwaukee to LA to Arizona to Houston, back to the Royals. Greinke has moved around a lot since his Kansas days. Along the way, Zack had one of the best seasons by a pitcher in the history of baseball, when in 2015 he went 19-3 for the Dodgers, with a minuscule ERA of 1.66 and a WHIP of 0.84. Only Greg Maddux has had a better ratio of winning percentage to WHIP in a single season. That's to say nothing of his insane 2.22 ERA+, the best of his career. But while his numbers have odd at times, what really stands out is the way Greinke saw the game of baseball. In his own odd way, he took it very seriously, to the point that he could have detailed conversations with Dodgers manager Don Mattingly about all of the prospects in the upcoming draft, as though Zack had been poring over scouting reports. Then there was how he approached pitching to Joey Votto of the Reds, himself something of an out-of-the-box thinker. When he was with the D-backs, Greinke and catcher Jeff Mathis were coming up with a plan of attack against Cincinnati, which meant having to deal with Votto, who during his own impressive career has led the NL in walks 5 times and crushed 350 career homers with a 410 OBP. Not an easy guy to pitch to. Greinke's solution was baffling and yet brilliant in its simplicity. Because Votto could pick up spin as well as anyone in the game, Greinke said he was going to start him off with a hanging slider, a pitch that just spun in the heart of the plate. Votto would recognize the spin and expect a break, but a hanger doesn't break. Mathis couldn't believe his ears. A hanging slider as a decoy? Hanging sliders get crushed in the big leagues, but Greinke was fearless, and he did exactly what he said he'd do. Strike 1. Greinke figured why not another. Votto took that hanger too, and got down 0-2. Greinke then buried him with his regular repertoire. He did something similar in 2022 when he was with the Royals and facing the White Sox. His plan this time was to throw a two-seamer, the same pitch he'd told Bob McClure back in 2006 that he'd never ever throw. In fact, it wasn't a pitch that Greinke threw at all previously, which is why in his mind it made sense to attack the Sox with it. They wouldn't be looking for it. Greinke then experimented with the pitch in a pre-game bullpen, and that was all the practice he needed. He yielded 2 runs in 5 2/3 innings and then didn't use the two-seamer again for a few weeks in a row. A great athlete, Greinke has prided himself on his fielding, with 6 career Gold Gloves to show for it. He's worked hard at the art and science of fielding from the pitching mound, showcasing that IQ in some interesting ways. For example, if it was an obvious bunt situation, Greinke might throw his slow curve and then sprint to cover the third baseline, where a slow pitch was sure to be placed. He also would cut off throws in the middle of the infield, when most times pitchers are supposed to back up bases. But Greinke knew exactly when to do it, as if he had a sixth sense about this dynamic of the game. With the D-backs, Greinke won 3 of his 6 Gold Gloves. Mostly, they sat in the office of the PR department, gathering dust. Greinke's insane and impressive career is nearing its end, and in my opinion, fans should be clamoring for Netflix to start the work on a biopic. The stories would be incredible. The time Greinke was hitting and asked for an appeal of his own check swing, the Puig-esque bat flips when he was with the Dodgers, the brawl he started when he plunked Carlos Quinton and broke his collarbone during the fight, hitting teammates intentionally with pitches, getting a samurai sword as a signing bonus. There's really no shortage of content. It's hard to imagine the sport of baseball without Zack Greinke, but that's almost what happened. The whole of baseball should be grateful that the Florida man came back, because the game truly has benefited immensely from his creativity, productivity, and oddball character. Who else but Greinke could berate their teammates for not washing their hands after going number 2 during a postseason meeting? Who else but Greinke could sign the biggest contract in MLB history at the time and then roast Chipotle publicly for raising its price on guac from $1.50 to $1.80? No one. Greinke truly is 1 in a million, and hands down, in our opinion at MTC, the weirdest player in baseball history, in the absolute best way possible. Now, thank you for watching. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and click this playlist for more essay content just like this. Have a great day.